Hello and welcome to this video, which is a quick tip on using the new input system in Unity and adding a gamepad and keyboard and getting those working in the input system in your game. So the new input system in Unity is fairly powerful. At the moment it's a little bit buggy and the documentation is far from complete, or it's extremely lacking. I hope they're going to improve on that. But it is very powerful, and I'm sure that a lot of us will start using it and enjoying it, enjoying its power once as it gets improved. So to get started, I have a fresh project here, and with a few minor changes, I've added some new folders under my assets folder, imports, prefabs, and scripts. And I've also gone ahead and imported just a very simple little shape that I can use as a dummy object to play with. So I'm going to pull this into my hierarchy, and if you don't have something like that, you can just go to game object, create 3D object, and use a capsule or a cylinder or a sphere or a cube or something. Anything that you just can throw some scripts on. It really doesn't matter what it is. I'm going to use this one. Now if you look at closely here, you'll see that there's a cube here next to it in the hierarchy window, and it's not solid blue. It has all kinds of different symbols on it. One surface is gray, the other one has a slot in it. Those have different meanings, so I encourage you to examine what that means. But now that I've pulled the asset into the hierarchy, it's not really an instance of a prefab yet. So what you want to do is pull it back into your prefabs folder. So click on original prefab, and now you'll see that it's turned solid blue. So now it's an instance of a prefab over here, and we have a prefab saved in our prefabs folder. And every time we drag one into the hierarchy window, now it's a new instance that we'll create. So this is a very useful feature of Unity, working with prefabs. If you click on this ship, it has the basic default components on it, and what we're going to be doing in this video is adding the new player input component as well as a script onto this. So the first thing that I want to do is go to your assets folder and create C# script and create a new script. I pulled it into my scripts folder and I called it controls. And once you've created that, don't have to change anything inside of it yet, but just drag it onto your player object. In my case, it's my test ship. Or you can select your ship and then add component input, player input. If this doesn't work yet, if you haven't installed the input system yet, then what you want to do is go to Window, Package Manager, and import the input system here. You don't have to select any of these samples, just the basic one. A dialog will pop up asking you to enable it. It doesn't matter what you click there, but once you've finished and once Unity has restarted, what you can do then is go to Edit, Project Settings, and just to check if it's in there, go to Player, scroll down to Configuration. And if you look down carefully, just before optimization, you'll see active input handling, and next to that input system package new. If you click the drop down, you get a choice between the old, new, and new system, or using both. Whatever, if you change anything here, Unity will restart. I'm just going to use the new input system for now, so I'm not going to worry about the other one, so I don't have to restart Unity. Now that we have this set up, let's examine the player input component that we've added on our player or on our ship. Here, the first thing that we see is that there's an actions item here with an empty slot. It says none, and in brackets, in parentheses, input actions asset. And then below it, there's a message that says we can create actions by pushing this button, create action. So let's press that. And I'm going to call that control actions. And when you scroll to your assets folder, you'll see that control actions is a new object that appeared in my assets folder. If I double click that, a new window pops up, and this is actually the new input systems input manager or map editor, and I'm going to grab this tab and I'm going to put it next to my game and scene tabs here in my scene window. So now I have scene, game, and control actions. I'm quite happy with what I have with this layout, with my with this window in front of me on the editor, so I don't have to find it somewhere else on my desktop. The first thing I wanted to do is notice that there's an autosave checkbox here. I find it's best to enable that, then I don't have to worry about remembering to click Save Asset. So I'm going to enable this checkbox. Next, there's a drop down here with control schemes, and you'll see various ones. Just keep the default all control schemes. Then if you look, you see 3 columns: action maps, actions, and properties. The first one has player and UI as action maps, and then there are some actions with bindings and properties. Go ahead and delete all these actions so that we can start with a fresh slate. Delete all of these. And now let's create a new one and call this fire. Let's call that ship fire action. I want to call it something unique to show you something. So it's a long name. It could have just been fire, but I wanted to call it something unique so that you can see what happens. This action under properties is a button. Here we have a choice between a value, a button, and a pass-through. Just keep it on button because fire is typically like that. And then under binding, we have properties that we can select. Now here, there's a drop down. And if you click that, you can go to keyboard and you can navigate to the key that you want. Instead of that, just press listen and then press the space bar. Now you get a choice between the space key or any key on the keyboard. Of course, we just want the space key, so click that and we're done. Now let's go back to our player object in our hierarchy and look in the inspector. Under player input, we still don't have an input action asset in the slot. So what we can do is we can either drag it from our assets folder in there, or we can just click this button here and select it. When we do that, if you give it a second or two, we're going to leave the rest of the settings exactly the way they are. Any for the default scheme, default map as it is, none for input module, UI input module and camera, and then behavior as send messages. Right, now after a little while, player input updates and you'll see new messages showing up. And one of them is on ship fire action. So I called this one here ship fire action. I called it unique so that we can recognize it. It's on ship fire action. And this is a message that we can now use in our script. So using send messages, this is very useful. Now we can go to our script, and I'm going to open the script for you, and I'll show you what I did. All I did was create. You can ignore this part. Just focus on this void on fire action. What did we call it? On ship fire action. I call this one is actually still called player. So I'm going to call this, just rename this one to on ship fire action. The other thing that you want to do is in the namespaces add using unity.inputSystem. So on ship fire action now will receive will be called whenever the space bar is pressed. And then I'm going to just log a message to the console which says pressed the space bar, exclamation, exclamation, exclamation. So let's save that and run this, and we'll see if it works. Now the console is here in the lower left. I'll press the space bar, and you'll see there it says press the space bar. Fine, so that works. Next, we want to get the gamepad working. So go up here in our scene view window and click Control Actions again. And let's create a new action by clicking this plus next to Actions and call that left stick. And now I want to connect a gamepad to the computer. And this is an old gamepad that I'm going to use. It's probably about 6 years old. It's unlikely to be very popular and very well supported. It's called the joystick PC recoil pad, I think. But to check, what we can do is we can go to Window, Analysis, and at the bottom here you see Input Debugger. This Input Debugger came with a new input system package. So double click that, or click on that, and a new debug window pops up, and here you'll see under Devices, joystick GG 909 PC recoil pad. This is what I just plugged into my USB port. I'm going to take this tab and also put it up next to my control actions so that it's on my editor. And if I double click the joystick in that, now I get a window. And if I start playing with the buttons on this gamepad, I see that I have actions happening. And I also get the name, the display name, the layout, and the type on this window. So this is very useful to debug your gamepads or devices. Now, let's go to Control Actions, and this left stick action that we just created, go to the Properties and select Value. Then it's not a button, but it's really going to provide us with a vector 2. Then delete this default binding that we had and add a 2D vector composite binding for left stick. And now we get 2D vector, and we get up, down, left, and right. So now we're going to add those. So click on up. You get on the properties here, you get a drop down. And if you look here, you can actually navigate to every key on a keyboard or whatever. But instead of doing that, just listen, press the left key up, and you get a few options here. I'm going to select stick up of the recoil pad, and for down, I'm going to do the same thing, listen, down on the recoil pad. For left, listen, left on the recoil pad, and for right, listen, right on the recoil pad. Then we want to go back to our control script, and we want to call, or we want to react to that event. So what is the event called? We called it left stick, and guess what it's going to be called under the player input. Here we have on left stick appeared as a message under player input. So we just need to create a void on left stick, and here you can use input value. This comes from the input system, and call it something like value. And then I'm just going to try to extract the x and y values. So what I did here is I have a parameter here, input vector, which is type vector 2, and I do value, which I just obtained from the message, dot get vector2. And then I'm going to do a debug.log format and stick input x, and I'm going to pass the x value here and the y value here. And so here are input vector.x and input vector.y, which I'm going to pass into this message. So save that and then run the program. And let's see what we get. So if we look here in the console window, if I press the left stick, I get y1 minus 1, y0, x minus 1, x0, x1, and I press a space bar. So there we go, the gamepad is now working, and I suppose that should make us all very happy. Like I said, this input system needs some work. I don't think it's a very finished and very polished system at the moment, especially the documentation needs a lot of attention. For example, if you look here under your ship or your player components, if I look at transform and I click on this little question mark, I should get a tooltip. Oh, it's still playing. Let's stop the play. I should get a play that says open the reference for transform. If I do it for cube mesh filter, I get a reference for mesh filter. But if I click on player input, it opens a reference for mono behavior, which is in a completely different manual than where this input system is. So that's one complaint. But the manual itself, the documentation, if you follow the quick start guide and you follow this, what they tell you there, it won't work. They don't have links. The images and the text don't agree. There are conflicts in it. They don't link back to the references or to the scripting reference for this input system, and so forth. So there are a lot of complaints about the documentation. But like I said, it's a very powerful system, so enjoy playing with it now that you have something working. I hope that's a great starting point so that you can get an object and get this into your game. Thanks for watching. Until next time,